Hello, and welcome to Nothing Ever Happens in Canada, but we know this is simply not true. This is a Canadian podcast about the myths, legends, and just good old stories Canada has to tell. I'm Canadian Girl. Thanks for joining me today as we head out to the very cold and snowy Newfoundland and Labrador, where our legend takes place today. Now let's go chase down the legend of Smoker, the White Trapper in Newfoundland and Labrador. Trigger warning. Though this tale is a legend, some parts are very dark and cruel towards women, and there is a brief mention of a murder. If these topics are upsetting to you, maybe skip this adventure and head out on a different one. That being said, you know me, I will only say what needs to be said, and I will warn you first before the subject comes up. Our story begins in the Canadian province of Newfoundland and Labrador, which has a very unique landscape. Jagged cliffs, ancient coves, islands, and colorful fishing villages line the coast. Some of the oldest rocks on Earth and fossils can be found here, dating all the way back to 565 million years ago. They have been discovered along the Avalon Peninsula at Grossmorn National Park. Honestly, if you quickly Google this place, she looks as beautiful as Norway, right here in Canada. I will put a couple pictures in the show notes. The province covers a total land area of 405,212 kilometers squared, and has a population of about 510,000, with most people living close to St. John's, Newfoundland. In order to live out here, especially back when our story takes place around the early 1900s, one must be strong and resilient. The weather is unpredictable in any season and can be very extreme at times. Living here in the early 1900s only made it more dangerous, as there were not the amenities available today to aid one during an awful storm. For example, many lived in nothing more than your average hut or bush camp tent, with no power, running water, or machines to dig yourself out. Winds could easily reach 70 kilometers or 43 miles an hour. Temperatures could reach -45, all while dumping 20 centimeters or 8 inches of snow all in one day. So yes, you had to be very brave and able to adapt quickly to any situation to survive up here. You could easily head out on a cold morning as a trapper to go check your lines, only to be caught in a severe snowstorm by lunch. The weather is truly unpredictable. Our legend today focuses on a man who lived through these harsh conditions, a local trapper named Esau Dillingham. I hope I said his name close to correctly. He would move at 20 years old from Grand Falls, Newfoundland, where he was born, and cross the Strait of Belle Isle to Labrador. He would set up his trapping lines here and begin his very short career of being an honest trapping man. He had a team of 14 dogs and used them to get around and check his many trapping lines. But Esau quickly became unhappy with his honest living, and only a couple years later, he felt it was too hard of work and not enough pay and wanted more. He was born an entrepreneur at heart and came up with a much better business plan that would line his pockets and give him everything he wanted. Esau would move again, this time to the backwoods, to start up his new, not-so-honest business. He moved near the Black Spruce Forest around Newtak. I hope I said that close to right. The most northern settlement at the time, and set up a space to brew his very own alcohol and became an illegal bootlegger. Esau Dillingham would begin brewing his backyard brew, as some called it, right away. He would mix sugar, yeast, spruce cones, and a few other ingredients. A spruce cone is a softer and thinner version of that of a thick wooden pine cone. He was able to gather all the spruce cones he needed, as they could be found right in his backyard in the Black Spruce Forest. He would cook his brew over an open fire, and it gave his alcohol a very smoky taste. This would lead to his famous backyard hooch becoming known as smoke. It was rumored to taste simply awful, but it did what it was supposed to do. Isa would soon start going by his nickname, Smoker, and he did for the rest of his life, and after that too. He immediately began selling his potent tonic to his local trapper friends. When it was an absolute hit with them, he began making even more of his brew and would hang up his traps for now, I'm going to say, because he will use them one more time before he is through with them for good. As for right now, bootlegging became his full-time gig, and he loved it. It was easy work for triple the money compared to what he was making before. Smoker had found his calling. Even before his riches came, Smoker was said to be a very evil and scary man. He was known to argue with anyone. He could become violent at any second, and he was not welcome in most Labrador settlements. Some say it was just who he was, but he didn't care. He continued to brew more and more of his known to be poisonous hooch and returned to those same settlements to sell it. Rumors quickly began to swirl around that men had been left crazy, blind, or even dead after drinking some of Smoker's deadly smoke. Smoker was even a victim himself of his own poisonous drink, drinking too much and leading to his terrible behavior. My personal thoughts? This hardly excuses this man for his vile behavior. He truly was just a very bad man. You cannot blame it on the alcohol, but I'm sure it did not help. His worst offenses of all, trigger warning here, please skip ahead about 1 minute. He was known for attacking women he knew were lonely in their cabins, when their husbands were out checking their trap lines or other things. And there is a tale of him murdering a man with his own bare hands in an absolute fit of rage. Smoker was also known to ambush and rob fellow trappers along the trails in the night as he delivered his terrible tonic. He sold his tonic called Smoke to all the local townsmen, the indigenous men in the area, and anyone else he could. And even though he himself and others knew the tales of his poisonous tonic, his price and his services of bringing the much-wanted alcohol right to your very own door was very hard to pass up. Smoker's cruel crimes and bootlegging business would be on the local authorities' radar for quite some time. When they finally located his secret backwoods hideout, where he had created all his moonshine, they smashed every single barrel and took him to jail in St. John's, Newfoundland for 1 year. This gave Smoker some real time to think about his business and how he could run it even better. After he served his time, he was released and immediately began to set up his business again. Except this time, he would be smarter, and he had a new plan to help him become invisible to the local police. He began to trade for or steal every all-white husky he could find in the area. Some say he had 14 all-white huskies in total, and some stories say he had only 8. For this story, we're going to go with 14, because I really like dogs. He painted his kegs all white and his sleighs to match the snow. Next, he would need some white furs to hide himself. Here's where Smoker pulled out those old traps one more time and caught himself 1 white bear, 2 white foxes, and several white ermines, which are basically a little white weasel. He would use all these white furs to make an all-white parka, hat, mitts, pants, and fur boots. All would go with his all-white sleigh, kegs, and dog team. He was now invisible, able to blend into the Labrador landscape and disappear like a ghost into the night. His plan was genius, and it worked. People continued to drink his poisonous smoke tonic. Most had even seen firsthand what had happened to other people after they had consumed Smoker's product. But still, Smoker's pockets began to fill up. The demand was so high he could barely keep up. With his new team of white dogs and gear, he earned a new nickname that some would call him the White Trapper. He continued to evade capture for quite some time, being that he could just disappear so quickly with his snow camouflage look. Officers would try their very best to catch the local bootlegger and known criminal, but he always got away. Sometime around the late 1930s, Smoker would lose his temper in the worst way. Most said he had begun to go mad due to consuming too much over so many years of his own poisonous tonic. Trigger warning here, please skip ahead about 1 minute. Smoker would kill a man with his own bare hands in front of many people. After this incident, he knew he had to lay low for some time. Most townsmen feared this man so much, there was no way they would report his actions to the police for fears of retaliation, and no one did. Smoker never went to jail for the crime. His business took a major hit during this time as he was unable to travel about and deliver his product like he once did, causing him to consume even more of his own poison and slowly causing him to go even more mad, they say. He would reappear around the beginning of World War II in 1939, trying to spark up his business venture again. Not long after this, Smoker's life would come to an abrupt end. But how it ended seems to be a complete mystery. As there are so many different tales, I'm not sure exactly how he died, but these are some of them. Some say he simply died of natural causes. Between all the alcohol, hard life in the back country, and numerous trips on his sleigh, his poor body could just not take it anymore, and he was found in his cabin. Trigger warning here, skip ahead 30 seconds again. Others claim a very angry husband of a local innkeeper would show up at his door and take him out for what he had done to his wife while he was away. Others say he was stumbling around in the wilderness in a drunken haze and fell and broke his back. Most believe this to be somewhat of the truth as it's told, while stumbling around from his own poison one day at Fish Lake or near the Grand River after he made his last trip across the straits of Belle Isle to Newfoundland. He would fall off a fish drying platform and break his back. Some say he lived for 3 days after this in so much pain he could hardly bear it. Though we may not know how he died exactly, what we do know is all the stories agree in his dying moments he pleaded not to be taken to the depths of hell to pay for his sins. He begged for his soul to be spared, to ride with his dogs for eternity and make up for the bad things he had done. Whether it was a gift or a curse, Smoker's soul was spared to ride through eternity and make up for the harm he had caused while he was alive. It's said every winter his soul returns. Tales of a howling dog team being heard throughout very snowy nights began to happen more regularly after Smoker's passing. It was hard to tell if the dogs were howling or the winds themselves at times. Many have reported seeing or even feeling the dogs whisk right by themselves or their cabin in the night. They believe he comes to warn them when there is a terrible storm in the area. Whenever anyone tries to track the phantom Smoker down, just like in real life, he seems to just disappear. No tracks have ever been found by anyone who claims to have encountered the ghostly trapper. Today, he is one of Labrador's most well-known phantoms, but not for his crimes or being a spook. He is known for rescuing lost and troubled travelers on very snowy, stormy nights, forever in debt for what he did while he was alive. There are countless sightings and stories of his ghost saving so many lives along the Labrador trails, from people being trapped by weather or just being completely lost, only to be saved by a man dressed in all white furs who would lead them to a safe spot and then disappear before they could even thank him. One man, Irving Penny, who was saved by the ghost of Smoker, was lost in a terrible blizzard. He had become disoriented in the storm and had no sense of direction when he heard another team of dogs coming towards him. A man dressed in all white fur, a white sled, and a team of all white dogs would quickly race by him and take the lead. Irving would follow the team for a good 30 minutes, and it took him all his strength and his dogs just to keep up. The man had led him to the winter house of Frenchman's Island, where another man was holding the door open for the lost Irving to come in and rest his tired self. When he turned around to thank the man who had just saved his life, he was gone. When he turned back to the man holding the door and asked him if he had seen the man who had just brought him here, the man holding the door replied to him that he was in fact the only traveler out there at the time on such a horrible night. Irving Penny spent years trying to understand who saved him that night. Another trapper went out to check his traps when he got caught in a terrible blizzard and was too far from any shelter to save himself. Just when hypothermia was about to set in on the poor lost trapper, Smoker would appear out of the snow, scoop the man up, put him on his sleigh, wrap him in some winter furs, and race the man to safety. He would take the frozen man to a hotel, set him down in a chair, waving hotel staff over to help him, and then the man, dressed in all white, simply disappeared. In 1949, Smoker would also save 2 RCMP officers. The province of Newfoundland and Labrador had just joined Canada and had become the 10th province. When 2 RCMP officers were out patrolling the area, which was new to them, when a sudden storm hit, catching the officers off guard, they became lost very quickly out in the back country, when suddenly a man in all white furs and all white dogs came right towards them. They knew this was their chance out of the area and followed the man immediately. They would follow the man for several hours until they reached the safety of an old trapper cabin where others were taking shelter from the crazy storm trying to keep warm. They turned to thank the man, assuming he had come into the cabin with them, only to look around the room and find he was not there. When they told the other men in the cabin their story, they all looked at the 2 RCMP officers and told them it was Smoker. Around 1970, he was seen again. This time he rescued an American school teacher who had got lost during a storm. He would lead the man to an abandoned hunting cabin to wait out the storm. As the teacher opened the cabin door, he immediately turned around to thank the man who had just saved his life, when he suddenly vanished right before his eyes into the snow. And that, my friends, is the legend of the white trapper known as Smoker, a terrible and vile man in life who did some unthinkable things, but then became known as a hero in his afterlife for trying to make up for what he had done. So if you're ever out in the Newfoundland and Labrador area late one stormy snowy night and get very, very lost, there is hope you will be found and rescued. But I suggest when you hear those dogs start howling right before the storm even comes, you get in your house, start that fireplace if you've got one. If not, crank that heat, grab a blanket, some snacks, and head out on another great adventure with me here on the channel. I'm Canadian Girl. Until next time, my friends.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.
Want to help support the show? You can do that in 3 simple ways. The first one, you can leave us a shiny 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. This small gesture means so much to this podcast as it allows us to move around on the podcast charts and meet more awesome listeners